The registration desk was made of something that looked like frozen smoke, and Nora Vell had been standing in front of it for 11 minutes trying to explain to an alien bureaucrat that there had been a mistake. The alien bureaucrat did not care. It was a Vorkai clerk, tall and scaled, with 3 eyes that moved independently of each other. 2 of those eyes were currently reading something else. Only one was pointed at Nora, and it did not look interested. The registration is complete, the clerk said. Delegate Nora Vell, human. Collective. Filed at 9:04 this morning under Article 3 of the Convergence. Compact. Confirmed. I am 17, Nora said. I am here on a school trip. That is not a category recognized by the Compact. I should not be registered. The actual delegate is a man named Harrow. He is a soldier. He is probably in the food hall right now eating something. Delegate Harrow was listed as secondary contact. Your identification tag was scanned as primary upon entry to the registration zone. Under Vorkai standard input protocol, the first tag scanned is assigned the primary registration. My tag was scanned because I walked through the door first. I was curious what the desk looked like. Curiosity is also not a category recognized by the Compact. Nora turned around. Behind her, Counselor Maeve, the human diplomatic liaison, was sweating through his collar. He was a round, soft man who had spent 20 years making sure humans caused no trouble in galactic spaces. This was, without question, the most trouble that had ever been caused. Can we appeal? Maeve asked. The opening bell rang at 9 o'clock, the clerk said. Article 7 of the Convergence. Compact states that no registered name may be withdrawn after the opening bell of the host cycle. The bell rang 4 minutes before the registration was filed. The registration is valid. The registration is final. From across the hall, a sound came that Nora had already learned to identify. It was the sound the Vorkai delegation made when they were pleased with themselves. It was something between a hiss and a purr, and it set her teeth on edge. Their lead delegate, Ambassador Drell, was watching from a raised platform, with the particular stillness of a predator that has just seen its trap close. He had been the one who objected to the correction. He had been the one who cited Article 7. Nora had figured that out in the first 3 minutes. Maeve pulled her aside, voice low and miserable. Nora, I am so sorry. I am going to contact Earth Command and the Colonial Office and every available legal body, but the Convergence Compact is not Earth law, and the station's governing AI has already confirmed the registration, and I do not know how to fix this. What happens if I just refuse to participate? Nora asked. Automatic forfeiture. Humanity loses its delegate status for this cycle, and the next, we lose the resource corridor negotiations. 12 years of work gone. Nora looked at the floor for a moment. Then she looked up at the clerk. I would like a copy of the full Convergence Compact rulebook, please. The clerk's third eye finally moved to look at her properly. It is 1,400 articles. I know. I would like it anyway. Maeve stared at her. Nora, what are you doing? Reading, she said. They gave her a small room near the competitor preparation wing. It had a cot, a desk, and a light that hummed at a frequency slightly too high for human comfort. Nora put her school bag down, took out the document file the clerk had given her, and sat down at the desk. The compact was old. Parts of it dated back 800 years to the first convergence. Games when 9 species had agreed that killing each other over transit rights was inefficient. It had been added to many times since, in layers, by different species with different priorities, and the result was a document that had not been read in full by any living delegate because it was assumed that the relevant parts were the combat rules in Articles 200 through 450. Nora read from Article 1. She made notes in the margins of her school notebook. She used a green pen for things that surprised her and a red pen for things she thought might matter. Later, by the time she reached Article 80, the green pen was running low. By Article 200, she had started a second notebook. 3 hours in, she stopped. She read one paragraph 3 times. She put her pen down, sat back, and looked at the ceiling. Outside her room, she could hear the Vorkai delegation celebrating in the corridor. They were loud about it. They wanted her to hear. Nora picked up her pen again. She wrote 4 words and read and underlined them. Twice. She kept reading. At midnight, she closed the last page. She sat in the humming light for a while thinking. Then she opened the door and found the young Theresi. Observer, Sala, sitting in the corridor outside, 6 legs folded neatly, apparently waiting. I heard you were reading the whole compact, Sala said. I finished it, Nora said. Has anyone ever actually done that before? According to Article 1388, the full text was last formally reviewed in its entirety by the founding committee in the year of ratification. Nora paused. 800 years ago. Sala made a soft clicking sound that, Nora had learned, meant something between surprise and alarm. I have a question, Nora said. The right of form. It says I must declare my fighting discipline before tomorrow's opening session. What is the exact definition of discipline as used in Article 214? Sala pulled up her reference file. She read the definition. She looked at Nora. Nora was already writing something down. What are you going to declare? Sala asked. Something true, Nora said. Nobody told the maintenance worker about the schoolgirl. He found out the same way the rest of the station did, which was by watching the public registration board update with her name beside the human flag, and then spending a few seconds making sure he had read it correctly. His name was Oren. He had worked on Road Delvan for 9 years, fixing the parts of the station that kept it from falling apart, which was most of it. He was human, from a colony 2 systems over, and he had not spoken to another human in about 4 months. He found Nora in the preparation wing the next morning by simply asking the corridor directory where she was. She was sitting on the floor outside her room, reading something, with a pen behind each ear and a third in her hand. You are the schoolgirl, he said. I am Nora, she said, without looking up. I am Oren. I fix things on this station. He looked at the document in her hands. Is that the compact? The second time through. I am checking something. He sat down on the floor across from her, because the corridor had no chairs. And he was curious. What are you checking? Article 214 says that a declared fighting discipline must represent a practice the contestant has engaged in regularly for a minimum of 2 years. I have been doing competitive academic debate since I was 14. That is 3 years. Oren looked at her for a long moment. You declared debate as your fighting discipline. I declared it yesterday evening. The confirmation came through an hour ago. He thought about the right of form, which he had watched twice on the station, broadcast during previous game cycles. He thought about what it looked like when a Vorkai warrior stood in the center of the arena floor and demonstrated. They are going to laugh at you, he said, honestly. Probably, Nora agreed. But they cannot disqualify me. I checked 4 times. That is not the same as it not being terrible. She looked up at him then. She had steady eyes, the kind that had already done the math on being scared and decided to keep going anyway. No, she said. It is not. Can you teach me how to not fall over if someone pushes me? He spent the rest of that morning teaching her the basics. Not combat. She was not going to become a fighter in 3 days, and she did not pretend otherwise. What she wanted was simple. If something physical happened to her in the arena, she did not want to look helpless. Oren showed her how to stand with her weight low, how to move with a push instead of against it, how to take a fall without cracking her head open. She was a careful learner. She did everything slowly, until she understood it, and then she did it correctly. In the afternoon, Sala came and found them both and sat down with a cup of something warm and watched Nora practice. The Theresi delegate asked about you, Sala said. What did they want to know? Nora asked. Whether you were a distraction strategy. Whether the humans sent a child on purpose to make the other species underestimate them. What did you tell them? I told them the truth. That it was a clerical error and you were adapting. Sala tilted her head, which was a Theresi gesture Nora was starting to read as something like curiosity. Are you adapting? I am trying to understand the shape of the contest, Nora said. The right of form I can survive. The trial of minds starts the day after. That is the part I am thinking about. Sala explained the trial of minds in detail. It was a set of simulated scenarios, rotating pair matchups, each one a different crisis with different parameters. The scoring rewarded efficiency and outcomes. Most species trained for it the same way they trained for combat. Establish dominance, control the variables, eliminate the opposition's options. Nora listened without interrupting. When Sala finished, she asked 2 questions. First, were the scenarios designed to have a single correct solution? Sala said no. They were designed to have multiple valid approaches, but the judging panels historically rewarded fast, decisive action. Second, was long-term outcome data included in the scoring metrics? Sala checked her reference files. She read for a while. Yes. Article 312. Long-term stability projections of submitted solutions count for 30% of the scenario score. Most contestants do not optimize for this because the immediate outcome score is visible during the round and the long-term projection is only calculated after. So most contestants do not know they are being scored on it, Nora said. Essentially, yes. Nora wrote something in her notebook. Then she asked Sala about the Vorkai. She asked about their social structure, their negotiating habits, what public failure meant to them, and how their champion Garo had won his previous matches. Sala answered everything. Nora was learning, a genuinely good explainer, careful with details and honest about the limits of her own knowledge. By evening, Oren had gone back to his maintenance shift, and Sala had gone to file her observer reports. Nora sat at her small desk and wrote 3 pages of notes on a single topic, the final accord. Stage 3. The last round. The format that rotated on a schedule and had not landed on negotiated resolution in 6 centuries because every pair of finalists had always agreed to substitute it with combat. Both finalists had to agree to the substitution. If one refused, the original format stood. Nora put her pen down. She looked at the wall. She thought about Garo, the Vorkai champion, who had never lost, who had been trained since childhood to dominate every room he entered, and who had absolutely no reason to expect that the format of the final accord would ever be anything other than a fight. She thought about what it would mean to refuse the substitution. She thought about whether she could survive long enough to be in a position to refuse it. She opened her notebook to a clean page and wrote one word at the top, survive. Then she wrote a plan underneath it. The arena floor was larger than her school's entire campus. Nora stood in the tunnel entrance and looked at it. The surface was white and hard and perfectly flat, lit from above by something that was not quite light, and not quite heat, but somewhere between the two. The seating rose around the floor on all sides, tier after tier, filled with shapes that were not human and sounds that did not have names in any language she spoke. The noise was not loud. It was constant. It came from everywhere at once and settled in the chest, like a second heartbeat. She was wearing her school uniform because the compact said contestants must wear traditional attire of origin, and she did not own anything else. Dark blue jacket, gray trousers, flat shoes. She had her notebook in her jacket pocket. She did not know why she had brought it. It felt wrong not to. The rite of form had been going for 2 hours already. She had watched from the tunnel. She had watched the Drethkai delegate, a species with 4 arms and a body like a folded blade, demonstrate 40 minutes of fluid combat technique that made the crowd produce a sound Nora could only describe as hunger. She had watched the Theresi delegate move through a pattern of defensive forms so precise that the judging panel stopped taking notes and just watched. She had watched Garo. Garo was everything the registration data said he was. Big, technically, perfect, and completely comfortable being stared at by 10,000 aliens. He had filled the arena floor with motion and sound and absolute certainty for 35 minutes. When he finished, the Vorkai section made the hissing, purring sound so loudly that it echoed. His score appeared on the public board, 94 out of 100. Nora's name appeared next on the running order. She walked out onto the floor. The noise changed. It did not stop. It shifted into something different, a kind of confused murmur that moved through the tiers like a wave. She was small, and she was human, and she was wearing a school uniform, and she was carrying nothing. The judging panel, 7 members from 7 different species seated on an elevated platform, looked at her the way people look at something they cannot immediately categorize. She walked to the center mark. She stopped. She stood with her weight low, the way Oren had shown her, and she took one breath. Then she began to speak. She spoke in universal common, which she had been learning since she was 12, and could use well enough, and she said, "I am going to demonstrate my declared primary discipline. Before I do, I want to note for the record that I am citing Article 214 of the Compact, which defines discipline as a practice engaged in regularly for a minimum of 2 years, with no restriction on the nature of that practice. I have been engaged in competitive academic debate for 3 years. I am going to demonstrate that now. She paused for exactly 2 seconds. The convergence games are described in Article 1 of the Compact as a formalized contest of excellence for the purpose of resolving competition between species without open conflict. That is the stated purpose. Combat is one method of demonstrating excellence. It is not the only method named in the founding articles. The founding committee in the year of ratification included 3 species that were not primarily martial cultures. Their contributions to the games are documented in Articles 1 through 12 and have not been amended. The right of form was designed to test the full range of a species' capabilities. I am demonstrating mine. Humanity has survived and expanded not because we are the strongest species in this room, but because we are among the most adaptable. My presence here, unplanned and unintended, and my participation in this demonstration, planned and deliberate, is itself evidence of that. Thank you. She stopped. She stood still. The arena was quiet for the first time since the games opened. Then the murmur came back, different again, and this time it was not confused. It was argumentative. Thousands of aliens were turning to each other and making sounds. The Vorkai section was very loud and not making the pleased sound. The judging panel conferred for a long time. Nora watched them. She kept her face calm. Her hands were shaking slightly inside her jacket pockets. She kept that to herself. One panel member sent a formal query to Veth, the arena AI. The query and response were displayed publicly on the arena board, as all procedural communications were required to be. The query asked whether the demonstration was valid under Article 214. Veth's response was 3 sentences long. It said that Article 214 imposed no restriction on discipline type, that the contestant had met the 2-year engagement requirement, and that no article in the Compact required the right of form to involve physical combat. The Vorkai delegation filed a formal protest within 30 seconds. Veth addressed it in under a minute. A registered discipline cannot be contested after declaration. The rule had been cited by the Vorkai delegation themselves in this same cycle to prevent the human registration from being corrected. It applied here as well. Nora's score appeared on the board. 61 out of 100. It was the lowest score of the day. It was also not a disqualification. She walked back to the tunnel, and she did not allow herself to feel the gap between 61 and 94 until she was out of sight of the floor. Oren was waiting in the tunnel. He looked at her face and then looked away. That was brave, he said. It was necessary, she said. How many people in that arena just heard Article 7 cited by the AI in a public procedural query? He thought about it. Everyone watching the board. Which was everyone? Good, Nora said. She took out her notebook and crossed something off a list. The trial of minds starts tomorrow. I need to eat something and sleep. She walked down the tunnel. After a moment, Oren followed, mostly because he wanted to see what happened next and increasingly believed that something would. The simulation chamber smelled like recycled air and something faintly metallic. And it was the first place in the whole games where Nora felt like she might actually know what she was doing. The trial of minds worked like this. Each contestant entered a sealed pod. The pod fed them a scenario through full sensory simulation. They made decisions. The scenario responded. Their choices were logged and scored. Then the round ended and a new scenario began with a new opponent pulled from the bracket. It was not combat. It was thinking. Nora was reasonably good at thinking. Her first scenario, a colony on a failing planet, 5 years of resources left, 2 possible evacuation sites, and not enough ships to move everyone at once. Her opponent was a Drethkai delegate who, according to the bracket board, had placed second in the trial of minds during the last cycle. Nora did not try to move fast. She moved carefully. She read the colonies. Demographic data, identified which population groups were most mobile, mapped the 2 evacuation sites against each other for long-term survivability, and began building a staged plan. It was not elegant. It was a grid of small decisions that added up, the same way you balanced a school budget or planned a field trip to a station in the middle of nowhere. 200 simulated years later, the colony had survived. A smaller colony than started, but a real one, with working infrastructure and a stable population growth rate. Her opponent's colony had strong fortifications and a high combat readiness score. It had also run out of food in year 61. Her score for round 1 appeared, 81. Her opponent's, 74. Round 2 was a first contact scenario. Nora recognized immediately that the unknown species as a threat to be assessed and contained. She could see their outcome data on the shared results board, strong defensive scores, moderate long-term projections, no contact established. Nora tried to talk to them. The scenario's unknown species had aggression parameters. It also had, buried in the environmental data, a resource shortage that was causing the aggression. Nora initiated communication protocols, made 3 offers of trade that cost her colony very little but addressed the shortage directly and watched the aggression parameters drop. By the end of the round, she had a trade agreement and a non-hostility pact with a species that everyone else had spent their round building walls against. Her round 2 score, 88. By the end of day 1 she was 4th in the rankings, which surprised everyone, except Sala, who had been watching the long-term projection scores quietly and said only, "I thought so." Oren watched from the observer deck above the simulation chamber. He did not fully understand what he was watching, but he understood that it was going well, and he found himself leaning forward in his seat whenever Nora's pod indicator light was active. Day 2 was harder. The scenarios in Day 2 were designed by the Convergence Committee to escalate. The variables were more complicated. The other contestants in the bracket were the ones who had survived Day 1, which meant they were the best. Nora won 2 rounds, drew 1, and lost 1 to a Theresi strategist who had a level of long-term planning that Nora acknowledged, in her notes afterward, was simply better than hers on that particular problem type. Then came the direct matchup with Garo. The scenario was a contested transit corridor. 2 parties with overlapping territorial claims, military assets, civilian populations, energy resources. The bracket had assigned them opposite sides. Nora represented the smaller party, Garo the larger. Garo played it as a war. That was not a criticism. He was very good at it. He moved his military assets with real skill and put Nora's side under immediate pressure in the first 20 simulated minutes. His resource control was efficient. His civilian calculations were low, but not zero. He knew what he was doing. Nora did not try to fight him. She did not have the assets for it. Instead, she looked at what her side actually needed and what his side was actually paying to take it. She found 3 places in the simulation where a negotiated boundary would give Garo's side everything they strategically needed while costing her side almost nothing they could not rebuild. She submitted the analysis as a formal proposal inside the simulation. Garo ignored it for 12 simulated minutes. Then he read it. Then he ignored it for 4 more minutes. Then he began probing it for weaknesses, because that was what Vorkai training taught you to do with proposals. Look for the trap. There was no trap. The proposal was exactly what it looked like. He could not find a trap because there was not one. He did not accept the proposal, but he stopped his advance. The simulation ran to its time limit with the corridor divided roughly along the boundary Nora had proposed, which the scoring system counted as a partial resolution. The scores appeared. Garo, 79. Nora, 80. 1 point. The Vorkai section of the observer deck went very quiet. Final day, 2 standings went up on the board. Garo was second. Nora was first. Not by much. 2 points overall. But first. Sala made a very rapid clicking sound, and then put all 6 limbs over her face. Counselor Maeve, watching from the diplomatic observer section, sat down heavily in his chair and stared at the board for a long time without speaking. Ambassador Drell did not make the pleased hissing purring sound. He looked at the board. He looked at Nora's pod indicator, which had just gone dark as she finished her last round. He said something to the Vorkai delegate beside him. That's Sala. Later, translated for Nora as, "Find out how she is doing this." That evening, the final Accord matchup was announced. Nora Vel and Garo of the Vorkai. The format, per the rotating schedule, was negotiated resolution. Garo's formal substitution request arrived in Nora's room before she had even taken off her jacket. He was asking to replace it with direct physical combat, which was his right under the rules. She had to respond by midnight. Nora sat on the cot. She held the message in her hand for about 40 seconds. Then she filed her response. Declined. She put the message down. She took out her notebook. She turned to the page. She had written on the second night, the one with survive at the top, and she looked at the next item on her list. She put a small checkmark next to it. Outside in the corridor, she heard the Vorkai delegation receive the news. They were not making any sound she had heard from them before. Veth had to pull the original procedural documents from the deep archive. The AI announced this publicly, in the flat neutral voice it used for all procedural announcements, and said that the negotiated resolution format had not been used since the 31st convergence cycle, 600 years ago, and that all delegates and observers should consult the supplementary rulebook section appended to the live broadcast. The announcement ran on every screen on the station for approximately 4 hours before the final accord began. In those 4 hours, the station became very loud. Nora heard it from her room. It was a different kind of loud than before. The earlier noise had been the sound of an audience watching something strange. This was the sound of thousands of beings who had just realized they were going to witness something that had not happened in 6 centuries, and were not sure how to feel about that. She used the 4 hours to eat a full meal, review her notes, and sleep for 90 minutes. Oren knocked on her door 40 minutes before she had to leave, and found her sitting at the desk, reading. How are you this calm? He asked. I am not calm, she said. I am organized. They look similar from the outside. She closed her notebook. Walk with me. He did. The grand chamber was the largest space on the station. It seated every delegation simultaneously. The floor held a single long table with 2 chairs, facing each other, and nothing else. The lights above it were very clear and very direct. When Nora and Garo walked in from opposite ends of the chamber, the noise from the seats did not diminish. It changed shape again, turning into something that felt like holding a breath. Garo looked the same as he had every other time she had seen him. Large, calm, trained. He was wearing full formal Vorkai attire, deep red and silver, which made him look like he had come to win something important. He looked at Nora across the table, and she could see him adjusting his expectations in real time. He had known he would be facing her. He had not fully believed it until now. Veth gave them the scenario through the table's shared display. A disputed transit corridor, 2 fictional species, energy resources, military access, routes, and a civilian shipping lane all overlapping in a 40,000-kilometer stretch of space. Both parties had legitimate historical claims. Both parties had current resource needs. The corridor was worth roughly the same to both. They had 4 hours. If they reached a binding resolution, the one whose drafted terms most favored their declared position won. If they did not, both were disqualified. Garo began immediately. He said his party required full military access to the southern route and exclusive extraction rights to the 3 primary energy nodes. He said this was non-negotiable. He said it the way Vorkai negotiators were trained to say opening positions, firmly, loudly, with no visible room to move. Nora let him finish. Then she asked him a question. What does your party actually use the southern route for? He paused. Military transit. How often? Another pause. During active conflict cycles. Approximately 4 times per standard year. And outside active conflict cycles? Silence. She kept going. The eastern route has identical transit capacity and comes within 200 kilometers of the same endpoints. It is also not in the disputed zone. If your party needs the southern route for military transit 4 times per year, and the eastern route provides the same function, then what your party actually needs is guaranteed access to a viable military transit corridor, not specifically the southern one. Garo looked at her. He was very still in the way that large, trained things go still when something unexpected has entered their space. You are trying to move me off my position, he said. I am trying to understand your position, she said. There is a difference. For 40 minutes, he refused to engage. He restated his opening demands twice. He cited the fictional species' historical claims at length. He was very good at it, technically. It simply was not working because Nora was not arguing back. She was asking questions, and the questions kept being specific, and the answers kept revealing that his party's actual needs were somewhat different from their stated demands. The audience watched in near silence. This was not what any of them had expected a final accord to look like. There was no clash. There was no dominance play. There was just a girl asking careful questions at a table. Around the 90-minute mark, something shifted. Garo stopped restating and started responding. Not conceding. Responding. He began asking questions back. What did her party need the energy nodes for? What was the civilian shipping dependency on the corridor? Could either node be shared under a supervised extraction framework? Nora answered everything directly. She did not oversell her position. She did not hide her party's actual constraints. When he identified a real weakness in her proposed framework, she acknowledged it and adjusted. He noticed that she acknowledged it, and something in his posture changed slightly. They built the agreement piece by piece. Military access for his party on the eastern route, guaranteed and legally binding. Energy, Node 1 remained his party's exclusively. Nodes 2 and 3 went to a shared extraction framework. With a fixed split, the civilian shipping lane remained neutral. Both parties contributed to a joint maintenance fund for the corridor infrastructure. It was not everything either of them had asked for at the start. It was better than both of them could have managed alone. With 38 minutes left, they submitted the resolution to Veth. The AI ran the evaluation for 4 minutes. Every screen in the grand chamber showed the processing indicator. No one in the seats made a sound. The results appeared. Nora's terms, 93% alignment with declared position. Garo's terms, 72% alignment with declared position. Nora won the convergence games. She sat still at the table for a moment. She looked at the result on the display. She felt something loosen in her chest that had been tight for 4 days. Across the table, Garo also sat still. He looked at the result. He looked at the agreement they had drafted, which was still displayed on the shared screen. He read it once more, slowly. Then he looked at Nora. How did you know I would stop refusing? He asked. His universal common was heavily accented but clear. It was the first time he had spoken to her as a person rather than as an opponent. She thought about the honest answer. Because you are smart, she said. And the framework was actually good for your side. Once you started reading it as a problem to solve instead of a fight to win, the answer was obvious. I just needed to wait for you to get there. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, in a tone she could not fully read, no one has ever waited for me to get anywhere before. The grand chamber found its voice again, all at once, from every tier. Simultaneously, and it was the loudest sound Nora had heard in her entire life. The first official request came in before Nora had left the grand chamber. It was from the Theresi delegation, filed through Veth's formal communication system, addressed to the human delegation, and it asked for a copy of the educational materials used in human competitive debate programs. Counselor Maeve received it on his communicator while he was still in his observer seat, and stared at it for a long time before he understood what he was reading. He had spent 20 years in galactic diplomacy managing downward expectations. He did not know what to do with an upward one. Nora sat in the post-event debrief room and answered questions for 2 hours. Not from humans, from aliens. 12 different delegations sent observers, or representatives, and they all asked versions of the same question in different ways. How did she know what she knew? How had she seen what she saw? She gave them the same answer each time, slightly differently worded. I read the rulebook, the whole one, not just the parts that seemed useful. The Drethkai observer asked a follow-up. Was it normal for humans to do that? Nora thought about it honestly. No, she said. Most humans also stop when they find the part that benefits them. I just had 3 days and nothing else to do. Ambassador Drell did not attend the debrief. He sent a formal acknowledgement of the result, as required by protocol, and nothing more. Sala told Nora later that he had spent the evening in closed session with the Vorkai Senior Council, and that the session had apparently been long and not pleasant. Garo was not in the session. He had requested a separate observer status. The council granted him as the game's runner-up. He spent the evening in the station library, according to the directory, accessing documents. Sala checked. What documents? They were human historical records. Specifically, records of Earth's pre-expansion centuries, the period when humanity had 8 billion people, a single fragile planet, and absolutely no margin for error. Nora, when told this, said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "Good." The political results arrived over the following 2 days. Humanities games. Victory translated, under compact law, to a priority negotiating position on 3 disputed resource corridors that had been stalled in arbitration for 19 years. Maeve handled the paperwork. He handled it with an energy Nora had not seen in him before. He looked like a man who had remembered why he originally took the job. The larger change was slower, but more real. The Theresi delegation formally submitted a proposal to reform the Convergence Game's final accord rotation. The proposal asked that the negotiated resolution format be permanently restored to the active schedule instead of being perpetually bypassed by finalist agreement. 8 delegations co-signed it. Within 24 hours, the Vorkai delegation, after 2 days of internal deliberation, did not block it. Garo, asked by a broadcast journalist whether he supported the reform, said that the current champion had won under the existing rules and the result was legitimate. It was a careful answer. It was also the only answer that did not block the proposal, and everyone present understood that. The proposal passed. 600 years of avoidance, overturned in 48 hours. Sala found Nora on the observation deck the last morning before the human delegation's transport departed. They sat and looked at the dying star together for a while without talking. The Theresi academic networks are already writing about this, Sala said. There is a researcher at the Convergent Studies Institute who wants to cite your approach as a formal case study in adaptive contest theory. I did not do anything theoretical, Nora said. I read a document and used what I found. That is what makes it a good case study, Sala said. Nora's transport left Road Delvan at midday. Oren came to see her off. He did not say much. He handed her a small folded piece of paper with his communication address on it, and said if she ever needed anyone to explain how station maintenance worked, she knew where to find him. She thanked him and meant it. She was back in her colony school 13 days later. Her teacher, a patient and generally unshockable woman named Reve, had been following the broadcasts. She had the kind of face people have when they have been trying to prepare something to say and have not quite managed it. When Nora sat down in her usual seat and took out a textbook, Reve stood at the front of the room and said, "Nora, what did you learn?" The class was very quiet. 12 other students were watching. Nora thought about the registration desk and the clerk with 3 eyes. She thought about the humming light in the small room and 1,400 articles read by the light of it. She thought about standing on a floor the size of a campus in a school uniform while 10,000 aliens try to figure out what she was. She thought about Garo reading human history in a library at midnight. Most people stop reading the rulebook once they find the part that helps them. She said, the rest of it is usually more interesting. Reve looked at her for a long moment. That is going in our class discussion. Material. There is also this, Nora said. She put a data card on her desk. Veth sent it. The Arena AI. It is a revised edition of the Convergent Studies curriculum, updated to include the 47th cycle. It comes with a note that says, and I am reading this exactly, that humans should have had access to this material 300 years ago, and the oversight is now corrected. Reve picked up the data card. She turned it over in her hands. An 800-year-old galactic AI, she said slowly, sent our school a textbook. Yes, Nora said. Because one of my students read the whole rulebook. Yes. Reve put the data card down carefully on her desk, the way you put something down when you are not sure yet how important it is, but you do not want to drop it. She looked at her class. She looked at the data card. She said, I think we should update the curriculum. Nora opened her textbook. She turned to chapter 1. She began to read.